Hello everybody, welcome to this live drafting and design analysis of some vintage Schiaparelli pieces. I always want to say Schiaparelli, but I think it is Schiaparelli. If I mispronounce it, do feel free to shout at me. If you haven't watched my channel before, I'm Charlotta. This is Charlotta's Pattern Cutting School, where we get inspired by all things vintage fashion and also learn how to draft and make our own. If you're interested in learning more with me, do have a look in the description. I've linked to my 3-step system, which is a really good free way to find out how I teach and get to know me a bit better. And then of course I've got my membership where you can really get stuck into learning with me. And hello everybody, I can see quite a few have joined. Hello Amaris, and hello Laura, and hello Suzanne. Lovely to have you all. That's very exciting. And hello Jen as well. Lovely to see you all. And we are in the UK. I'm in the UK, so I just had my lunch. So if I'm slightly sleepy, I apologize. But I think you're joining us from around the world, so that's lovely. So today I thought I'd look at some Elsa Schiaparelli, and you probably all know her famous lobster dress or the beautiful surrealist. What I always liked about her is that she actually did a lot of really wearable fashion. So that started out in the 1930s. She did really fantastic knitwear. So have a look at it online. You know how Gucci, about 10 years ago, they came back with a big bang. I got their new creative director. And they did the whole collection where they had like trumped-old bows out of sequins and stuff. And that is very much what Elsa Schiaparelli did in the 30s, where she did fully fashion, which means it's knitted in rather than cut. And she did these really beautiful jumpers with knitted bows and images and stuff, which was very innovative for a time. It's still innovative, still beautiful. But she basically made really wearable fashion for the modern woman. And these are all the sort of details I really like with her, where it isn't the big lobster or the big merry-go-round. It's where it's like really wearable stuff. And that's what I would like to look at today with you. I've got about 25 minutes. So I have got 9 Schiaparelli images. So let's see how far we get. Some are evening wear, most of them are day wear. There's also some after the war stuff, so the 1950s stuff, because I find that quite interesting when she was towards the end of her career, but still made beautiful stuff. And hello Katja, thank you so much for joining us as well. So let's get started. I'm gonna be really low tech and turn my camera around. I haven't done any of the streaming software, so hold on a second while I switch everything around. As always, not the most professional, but hopefully we'll still learn something together. Okay. So, is that close enough? I'm going to go a tiny bit closer. And as always, this is all my opinion, so sometimes I don't get it right, and you're very welcome to disagree with me. It's always this is my opinion. Sometimes people get very angry with me. I just think, just trying to tell you how I think it is. Doesn't mean it's how it really happened. And actually, I'm just working on a tutorial for tomorrow for the membership, which I know quite a few on, which is this dress. And this dress is one of those styles where it doesn't act. From the image, it's actually quite hard to work out how the dress really would have worked. And I think whenever you look at vintage images, is to use your knowledge, and of course sometimes you have to reinterpret, sometimes you have to guess a bit, and it's just the best guess you can do. Oh, and hello extra cucumbers, and hello Eva, so lovely to see you on here. Second time I've seen you live this week. And hi Jen. Jen is saying it's perfect. Who needs streaming software? Indeed. I'm sure you will appreciate that slightly nausea-invoking flip. Okay, so these are quite late Schiaparelli. This is a 1954 4 set of blouses by Schiaparelli from a fashion magazine. And the reason I want to look at them, because they're very variable styles, but they're also really clever. So they are very Schiaparelli. Let's just have a look at what it's written about it. A wardrobe of beautiful blouses by Schiaparelli to put your suits on a full-time schedule. A low neckline dinner blouse to have in silk. The throat-high daytime blouse would be perfect in silk crepe. Oh, so these are two, so that must be original models. So this is actually illustrations for sewing pattern, because £2.50 probably wouldn't buy you a Schiaparelli blouse even by 1950 standards. So these are Schiaparelli at some point, or actually in the 30s as well, she did licensed patterns, and these are examples of it, but they're really pretty. So we are going to do quite a bit of guesswork. The first blouse by Schiaparelli, which is this Evening Blouse, that's a really interesting one. So you've got that sort of low neckline. I'm going to draw out. I'm going to ignore the bow for now. I'm not sure whether it's ornamental or working bow. But what is quite interesting, so we got our typical sort of button stand. It's like a few pin tucks, so it's sort of evoking a classic, you know, menswear white tie or black tie shirt like this, and it's tucked in a waistband, but it would have probably been the sort of typical 50s style where you tuck it into a waistband, so it's slightly longer and it tucks in. What is really interesting, it's, you can see it's all from one piece, but it's all this volume basically coming up, and I only glanced at this, so I'm very much drawing it as I see it. So this is new to me as well, but I just thought these looked so amazing. I wanted to with you. So you can see there's lots of volume stuck in there, which gives me the indication that this actually might be a real working channel. So it's not stitched into facing. This is actually gathered to create that look. And this, my drawing doesn't look the most flattering, but I think in the silk it would be a really nice drape. What it basically is, let me get my blocks. What they've done is they've done the low scoop neckline, lots of cutting lines, and then you convert both your shaping into these cutting lines, and then you add some extra slash lines. So your pattern piece ends up doing something like, it's got basically really long, this is your neckline, this is your center front, and that's your armhole, and then your waist and your side seam look like something like that. So we got all these volume basically coming towards the neckline. So that's a really interesting method. I wonder whether this is lined with a fitted facing to keep its shape. Is how I would do it, and we're going to talk about that in actually next week's membership, which is all about drafting a lining for a fitted garment or 3D style, which is a very catchy title. But basically all this extra volume creates this beautiful gathers here, and because the way they're sort of really 3D draping on the edge, I actually think inside there is a funnel. And if you do it that way, if you have actually a working funnel and you have your, I think your bow might still be ornamental, because otherwise they would move too much. But it might be a real bow, who knows? You can have a look at where we can find the original pattern and they might tell you, but it might be an ornamental bow. But that basically gathers together. If you do that, of course, if you have a working funnel, then your lining has to match the outside, because if you have a fitted facing, then you can't make this go small and big when it's fixed to it. But I think even if you fix it to it, it should look really nice. And Eva just said something very clever. Eva just said, I'm wondering if a collar goes through the channel and becomes the bow. Ooh, I like that idea. So what Eva is thinking, which I actually hadn't thought about it, I'm slightly behind you. I assumed, because you're right, they've sort of implied that it's the same collar, and this is Schiaparelli. So if you, it could be something like, if you want to be very clever, basically, is that you have, because it's quite a, it's not that tall a collar, is it? So it's like something like that, and then it's ooh, that's a bad drawing. It's a collar looks something like that. What Eva is thinking, and I think you might be right, is that this collar actually extends underneath here into the funnel and holds it all together. Which would be very clever. I have done it. I like that idea. It'd be interesting to try it out. Because you have your neckline like this, and it's quite a flat collar, so it lays completely flat, which is why I've drawn it completely wrong. It's more like this. You could do it, so it's basically less of a, it looks like a collar, but it's actually more of so underneath it you would probably then also have like a band to hold it all in place and fix it to the back, maybe, because we don't know how the back looks, because the back could have two ways of looking, and the back could either be a really low cut like this, so it's literally one, your back could be an extension of your front piece, so it could be all in one. So that'd be really nice. And then of course this could be a halter neck, that would work really well. And the other option is that it is a more conventional blouse at the back and still has that sort of collar, but it's all held together. This is, I think it would be quite good fun to try the version Eva suggested, where you basically use your collar as a halter neck facing, and then the shirt itself basically is probably, if it's in a thin silk, you would just cut it double, so it's lined in self if it's thin silk, which would be very glamorous, and then you just stitch on a funnel, which is just like a stitch line, and then it just sort of gets threaded around the collar. It would be very beautiful. Eva, you have to try it out and then show us. I'm just looking at yardages. I know it doesn't tell us how much, but yeah, so this is something where you could make it quite simple. At its most simple, it's basically a gathered neckline, which is a nice detail, and if you just want to have a gathered neckline, you would do it where you literally construct your blouse as normal out of silk or something, and then you just have this section double, and that section you slash and spread that quite a lot, and then it just gets gathered into your fitted basic front. So that's the most basic method, but I think it would be fun to do the one where the collar shapes and forms also the tie, so it becomes so very bit more experimental. This one I found quite fascinating because it's sort of really, this would be quite not very nice to stitch if you look at all these seams, but it looks beautiful. So this is a daytime blouse. It looks so very sporty. I quite like it. It looks like knitwear. and it's basically using more or less every single grown-on sleeve method you can. So this daytime Schiaparelli blouse has both a gusset and also a sort of really interesting, it's not a raglan, but it's sort of a set in shoulder line, a double set in shoulder line. So it's really playing with how your sleeves are constructed. So we've got our sleeve like that, and you can see our gusset quite clearly. So that's what you can make this quite fitted, but still have amazing movements. You can have a really beautiful shoulder. And then you can see our grown-on sleeve is actually, the sleeve piece is like this, and I've drawn it slightly too low, I think. So it's actually quite a fascinating pattern piece, because this is one piece, so not very economical in the fabric usage, but it is a beautiful one, and it probably the piece looks something like this. So that is your pattern piece, which means if you have a stripy fabric or something, it'd be really interesting how the stripe moves as well. And then it's got a second panel which hits at exactly the same point. Can you see? This is where to stitch that. Ooh, in a silk we have to be quite experienced. So something I would want to have a little bit of a break beforehand and maybe do a sample to prepare myself, because it's very, you can see I've very narrow triangles towards that shoulder point. And then the third section which hits it is that beautiful grown-on collar, like a funnel neck, but it's grown on rather than separate. And I think that gives it sort of quite a sportswear feel as well. And actually this would, in a knit, would be absolutely stunning, but it's beautiful. So they are suggesting in the silk, and it's like, by the look of it, it's 3 colors. So that would be quite stunning. But it is that point where you literally, at this point, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 seams meeting. So you first of all have to be super precise, because they can't be wonky. And you also have to be really careful with sort of how you cut away all your seam allowance, how you iron your seam allowance, which direction, because otherwise you get really bulky. So if I would be looking from the top, and this is my top line, so my neck is here and my cuff is here, it looks something like this. So you can see how tricky that is to stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if that is really tricky, what you could do to make it a bit easier is slightly stagger them. I think it would still look really pretty, but it would make stitching about 90% easier, because you also, if you make, instead of a pointy tip, if you make that say like 2 centimeters wide, it's a lot more stable. But I thought that was a really beautiful bow, and the way you would beautiful sleeve. And this Schiaparelli Daywear blouse, you would start to draft it with your classic gusset sleeve. So you would draft a gusset sleeve and make sure the fit is fine, and once you've done that, you can add all your extra shaping lines. So start getting all the shape right, then start adding your seam lines here, and then finally you add your funnel neck collar. And for that you can use there's a tutorial for sort of 1940s grown on necklines on the membership, and you can use that. And Extra Cucumber is saying, could the top part be a one piece wrapped around rather than seamed at the shoulder? It would be easier, but you can't actually, because of the images, for me it looks like there's a seam going all the way to the top. And you would struggle because the piece looks literally like this. So I think it needs a seam there. It'd be beautiful to not have a seam there, so it becomes like a yoke. If you had a seam here, if you added an extra seam line, then you could definitely make this section one piece and eradicate the seam there. And alternatively, you could actually make this one piece. Here again, it looks like it at least has a dart. Either has a dart or a seam, you can't really tell. Because if you had this sort of one piece, a sleeve would end up something like, then go at the back, it'd be something like this. And this is where I would love to see the back view, because it might be that the back is a satin sleeve. It might be a completely different sleeve. So let's look. I was going to finish in about 10 minutes, so this is going to be interesting because I spent too much time doing it. Let's have a look. So actually quickly recap. This one, really easy to draft. Gusset sleeve, and then you add your grown on 1940s neckline. This one, there is I've got a tutorial for, I think it's called like a darted neckline. I put it in the description if I can find it. And you can start this red, but then this is somewhere where you have to sort of start with your basic flat pattern cutting, but then you might have to experiment on the stand. The next one I wanted to show you, I'm not actually going to draw it, I just want to show you why I think it's a really nice idea. What this has done, this is again, it's a I think it might be 30s or 40s. Again, daytime blouse, and it's got that stamp print, so very Schiaparelli, because it is sort of slightly surreal. What is really nice about this Schiaparelli blouse is that, first of all, how they've used ribbon to frame. I think they framed the collar and they added the bow, which sort of echoes all the black lines on the print, which of course represents a stamp book. What they've also done is, I'm going to sketch it out quickly if I have some more paper. So, what's really clever about this blouse is, or I liked it anyway, is that this is a really simple blouse. If you've done the masterclass, it's like your yoke blouse. But it's got a yoke which sort of goes up slightly, and either actually, I think it might just sort of go at an angle. Then we've got sort of slightly gathered sleeves. So far, so pretty straightforward. But then, this being Schiaparelli, there she's basically, this is our outline of the blouse. Actually, it sort of goes out a bit. I think it's something like this is the outline. Then this central panel, which has a little bit of gathers, so just like the yoke top, this central panel is on the bias. So we've got straight of grain, 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 straight of grain. So if you really use the print, you can sort of see where you have your straight of grain print, and then the sleeves of a straight of grain, and then suddenly she jumps. And that moving from a straight of grain to a bias disrupts the whole pattern and makes it a lot more flatter, because if this was all cut on a straight of grain, it would be really wide, because it'd just be lines going across, and it's also become quite flat. by putting on the bias, it suddenly has like movement, and it suddenly looks quite very sort of dynamic, and it sort of looks like it's flowing around the body, even if the blouse itself is quite straightforward. And I wonder if there's a facing underneath here which is stitched to either side and which sort of holds it on place, which is again of a straight of grain, because otherwise the bias here would just spread. So I think there's a facing underneath it which holds it in place, and then this part is probably just really nice and drapey. And of course you could also again do a facing underneath on the straight of grain, but it's, as long as you've got it down here, it sort of holds it in place. So that's a really quick drafting option to just move parts of your bodice on the bias, and it's a really good effect. This is another really interesting Schiaparelli detail. It's an awful picture, I apologize, but what I liked about it, this is a bit interesting because it looks like there's some weird bias going on, but what I liked about it, we talked about this a while ago in the last live Q&A on the membership, but this has just got a really nice asymmetric collar, and it could be the front and back are the same, or the back is just a normal collar. And then all she's done is probably got a raglan sleeve here, and then on this side it's got a normal satin sleeve. But what she's done is she added that sort of frill, which is your normal spiral cut, or like this, but it goes along the neckline, and then it actually goes down your raglan, and then it probably goes around the back, and again on the back you got the same frill. So I thought that was a really, again, a quick detail, but because of its asymmetric line, it isn't like sometimes, you know, if you did like a round collar like this and you had your spiral frill, it looks a bit like a Pierrot, like the sort of Italian clowns, but this suddenly becomes much more interesting, I think. So anyway, what do you think? Let's have a look what else I picked. Ooh, this is knitwear, so I'm not gonna draw it out because it's fully fashion knitwear, so it's knitted, but I just wanted to show you, like, she's added a grow grain detail to the neckline. It's a really simple detail, but of course you could do it if you made a simple dolman sleeve, and we had quite a few tutorials on dolman sleeves recently. This is just a quite a stunning, quite big detail, and it is literally grow grain ribbon, which is a bit like Petersham ribbon, 100% cotton if you can get it, and then she's just stitched it on top, and it'd be interesting whether the neckline underneath is like this, or it could also be like that, but that would be a really interesting neckline for any style. There's one more I wanted to share with you, which was quite stunning. Oh, this was just more sewing patterns, which I think this looks very 30s, but I liked this sleeve line, which reminded me of you, Jan, and the lovely dress you made. It's a bit like that, it's just got a different neckline, but it's a really nice sort of just slightly dropped shoulder, so it becomes like a grown on sleeves, and then it has the voluminous sleeve to contrast that, and that's quite a nice neckline with the curves, and then you have like a square neckline. But this, I have always loved that style of collar. So it's where you basically, you start drafting a, I will use a sailor collar for this method, and I'm going to ignore the bow because we don't, that's, the bow sort of grow, it's like a roll collar with a bow at the end. But what is really nice about this, and this, what's clever about this Schiaparelli style, is that the jacket actually gets buttoned to the skirt, so I really like that. But this is basically a sailor collar which moves past your shoulder line, which means it's just got a shoulder seam but you draft it exactly like your sailor collar, but instead of joining it at the shoulder, you basically keep that seam on the shoulder. And that way you can really draft the back in any shape you want to be. And what she's done was really clever. By applying this trim, it basically looks like it sort of moves in and out, because this is like your normal bodice underneath, but because we've got this trim tassels which sort of move like that, it looks like the whole thing is a very 3D, like an S shape, and it looks a lot more complicated. It sort of moves in and out, but it is just your sailor collar extended past the shoulder line. And a sailor collar of course always has a seam here, but with this one, because with keeping the seam there, I would actually do this on the fold, so you've got your original bodice like that, and then your sailor collar looks something like this, and it's either one continuous line or it might be slightly shaped, but this is basically a front pattern piece. And you can just cut, it all depends what fabric you're using. If you're making this into cotton or silk, again I would just cut everything double in the self fabric, and then you just have basically a reversible jacket. If it's like a wool, then you might want to keep that seam and then face this part in like a silk. We can have lots of fun with that. If you want a tutorial for that, for the membership, do let me know, because I thought that would be quite fun. And actually we should put that on YouTube later on, because shawl collars are my bread and butter. And I'm glad you like that style, Jen. I sent you the image later. I thought it was quite you. And let's finish off. What's the time? 2:05. Oh, I'm going to show you, because I know Laura has been working pattern magic. This one, I found this quite fascinating because it has these amazing 3D pockets, which I'm pretty sure are in one of these books. And it's just always nice, because these drafting methods, sometimes this the pattern magic, I know Laura has been doing the bamboo style. I'm pretty sure I've seen it there. I made it up. How it grows out. It's sort of one of those details which have been reinterpreted lots of times. I think we might have to use something like this as a starting point. This is not identical, but this is the Pattern Magic number 1, I think, yeah. But can you see how they have sort of a similar 3D-ness? Hers is even a bit cleverer how it moves out of it. I'm not going to attempt to draw it as a slightly grey image, but it's basically you sort of add panels to hold it all up, but the more amazing stuff so it actually stays up. But I thought it was really clever. And Suzanne is saying the collar is like a flower petal. I agree. I think the collar, I appreciate these for its cleverness and 3D pattern cutting, but the collar is actually really beautiful, because it is like on the back it probably look exactly the same. It sort of grows like that. I think it's like a really nice, but it's that sort of forward movement, isn't it? It looks like it's framing your face rather than standing up. And to do that, you probably, I would actually just do a stand collar, and then I would actually draw its shape on and then cut it out, so it's exactly the same right shape. And Eva, you just asked whether I'm fluent in Japanese. I'm absolutely not, but back in the days when these came out, you could only get them in Japanese, so I got them in Japanese. I've got them in English nowadays as well. But if you ever looked at them, the diagrams are so fantastic that quite often you can decipher a lot of it from the diagrams. So these were my Schiaparelli picks for today. I'm going to leave you with this really nice coat, which again is actually really straightforward, but she's just done some sort of clever shaping to the front, which makes it looks like you're basically wearing a men's, like a notched collar buttoned down. But of course she just cut the front like that, but it gives you the illusion again that it is something really complicated, but it's actually quite straightforward. I'm going to switch around again and say, so this were my Schiaparelli picks, and Eva just said, how does this look so modern, what a designer. And I think that's what I love about her. I the lobster and stuff and the theatrical pieces, they're amazing, but what I actually like about Schiaparelli, that she was like a real woman's designer. She did stuff for women to do things in, a bit like Claire McCardle. Like you went out and, you know, this is a coat you could wear now, but she always played around with proportions and how she smoothed stuff around. So that's why I think she's really come to a forefront, this sort of stuff you can wear every day and have fun with. And this is it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. You're very welcome, extra cucumbers. I think next week I'm back with Trisha. And then actually I have to look at my calendar. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. And you're so welcome, Katja. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you, Jen, for joining me. I sent you that image. And you're very welcome, Suzanne. It was lovely to catch you live. And it was lovely to catch the rest of you live as well. And that's it for me for today. And I will see all of you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.